have a very have a preeminent role in management of forests, and as all of you know, and its resources. However, their effectiveness, the role they can play is again circumscribed by the governmental institutions we have, the way the government actors behave. There's no set kind of governance system and framework available which says that this is how a framework should be formed, how a system should be formed for allowing the communities to manage the forest, or allowing the communities a role in management of forest. There are different local conditions in our country. So what I'm going to try to say here is bringing an experience from Nagaland's perspective, maybe put forth something which you can take away from what we experienced there in managing our forest. I'll start by presenting a little bit on Nagaland. This is the forest imagery of the forest imagery for the country. If you see, northeast has the maximum forest cover of the mountains, right, stretching right from Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. The green portion shows where the forests in India stand. In fact, the rest of the country also, if you see, it's the mountains which are whether it's the Western Ghats or in Orissa, Chhattisgarh, which are the real carbon sinks, containing the forest cover. They are also very precious because quite a lot of them also contain the mineral resources in the country. Now this is the forest cover of Nagaland. You can see it's mostly green. It's 80% of the cover of the land of Nagaland is covered by forest. But there is a lot of things hidden behind this. I come to it in the next slide. Most of it is open forest. Very dense forest is only 7.68%. Moderately dense forest is 49%. The figures keep on changing. 2011 figures are a little different. The very dense forest cover has increased a little bit. Now these are the Nagas, the inhabitants of the state, of my state, the state I come from. These pictures are taken from very strong traditions. These pictures are taken in one of the premier festivals held in Nagaland, the Hornbill Festival, where the cultures and traditions are in full distinct. These are some of the dances which take place there. As I said earlier, 80% of the land is covered by forests. There are strong traditional and customary institutions, much more stronger than the government institutions also. In fact, the government's strategy has been strengthen these institutions through its various programs. You must have heard about the village council, the PDPs, the village development boards, and also the communitization process, where we have tried to build on this, the social capital available with these community institutions to deliver the development goals of the state, to live up to the expectations of the people. However, simultaneously during the last 6 decades, the state has had a problem with insurgency, and it has led to a creation of parallel set of institutions which eat into these governance institutions provided by the tradition as well as the government. Now, while these are the forests available, you can see the bamboo. These are some of the biodiverse resources. The world's hottest tree, the tallest paddy, the tallest rhododendron tree. The difference in the way forest and land is governed in the state, I'd like to say a couple of things. The eminent domain rights, which is normally associated with the government, which is normally associated with most of the states in the country, we do not have very clearly defined eminent domain rights for our state, particularly with regard to regulation of forest resources and other land resources. The full rights lie with the people. This is the traditional rights which are exercised by the people. As against the rest of the country, where forests are owned by the government. In Nagaland, 90% of the forest land, 90% of the 13,000 square kilometer that we have is owned by either the community or the private people. The forest quality, though there are still thick patches like this, it has deteriorated. Like I pointed out earlier, we have only around 12% or so in dense category, 8% or so in very dense category, and 12% in moderately dense category. I feel, and I think this is the predominant feeling also in the state, is that the change, the degradation of the forest during the last 4 decades has come in because of the imposition of this felling and afforestation regime, which was perpetuated through government structures, especially the forest department, with its stress on timber extraction, and also at the same time the greater integration of the state with the rest of the country. However, in the late 90s, I think 1999 if I'm not forgotten, the Supreme Court in the Godavarman case passed a very strict judgment. This has resulted in a lot of positive changes which has come up in the management of as far as the management of forest, not only in Nagaland but the northeast is concerned. Now, these changes have perforce brought into focus the traditional good practices which have been there in Nagaland, and also the need to build on these. I'll try to touch on only 2 of these practices which I think are very important in the frame that we are considering now, in the frame which communities manage forest. The first is the traditional reserve forest. In Nagaland, if one goes to any of the village, in any of the districts, and one talks to the people, sits with them, and one will find out that invariably each of the village will have a small pocket of forest which has been traditionally preserved, left untouched. Why? Because the people realize its importance. People realize its importance for the benefits given, mostly for the water catchment area, but also for the non-timber produced biodiversity which they can, biodiverse resources they can tap from there. In fact, since 1990s, after the people realized the degradation which has taken place in the forest because of 30 years or 40 years of logging operations which went on, people themselves started to impose regulation on the extraction of resources from the forest. And we had these community conservation areas, community conserved areas which came up, which sprung up all across the state. We in fact did a project and we listed out the community conserved areas. There are as many as 766 community conserved areas in the state. In the 4 districts of Eastern Nagaland. This project ran in the 4 districts of Eastern Nagaland only. Now the size of these community conserved areas varied from a few hectares to hundreds of hectares. It was felt as part of the project that there is a need to really jump on this bandwagon of community conservation, and also to see how we can take full advantage of it. And it was one of the recommendations which came out was that we should, as part of this project, we had taken up 6 bigger joint conservation areas which had approximately 231 square kilometer of land covered under these community conservation areas. Now, most of these areas, the resolutions have been passed by the locals themselves, by the villagers themselves. There is hardly any resources which have been transferred to them for managing it. The benefits have been realized by the local people only. Government has acted in only creating awareness, in only saying that yes, these are some of the other advantages you get out of or maybe bringing together 3 or 4 villages so that the community conservation areas, the total scope increases. Taking into account these, in fact, this is a growth which has happened in the community conservation areas over the last 20 years. You can see some awareness activities which we introduced in the 2000s. In the 1990s, in fact, the government of Nagaland launched a massive forestation program, plantation program on the lines of what Sikkim government has launched now, wherein almost every household was given 10 seconds to plant, that they have to plant this 10 seconds. And there was a massive forestation program which took up. And after that, this CCA's thing has increased from 2000 to 2010 again because of this project where we stress on awareness, on strengthening the capacities of the villages to manage the forest. Again, the community conservation areas have increased a lot. In fact, taking advantage of this, learning a lesson from this project, the government has launched a scheme for management of these traditional forests. The key elements of the scheme are again the transfer of resources. We are trying to transfer resources linked to the number of hectares which are covered in the community conserved forests. We are also trying to build a strong monitoring mechanism so that we can maybe move to the next higher level and try to grab resources from outside the state. And also the third most important component is facilitate the communities, build the strength of the communities so that they can take on conservation efforts on their own. The key lesson which comes out of this conservation efforts, these community conservation efforts, is that people are aware of the benefits of forests, but they are also at the same time wanting to extract benefits out of that. Now, unless and until push comes to shove, unless and until they realize that beyond this, their benefits are going to be affected, they are not going to take up conservation efforts. Now, the responsibility of the government is how to catalyze that without leading to over-exploitation of the resources which are over-exploitation of the forest resources. This is what happened in the 90s when the people realized that forests have been overexploited and they need to put in a mechanism. They need to put in a mechanism to ensure that forests are not overexploited. That's where the